Hello, Photography 10s. Welcome to my first video. Boy, this sounds weird. It really feels weird teaching to you guys over a video instead of seeing you all here sitting in front of me in the classroom. It's quite a crazy time that we're all in. On the website, I am sitting at the introductory level introductory unit. So that's the unit that we're going to try and keep pushing through here for the next little bit. And until we get software figured out where we can do a little bit more of our digital processing that we've been working on. Depth of field. So depth of field is controlled mostly by the aperture, which is the opening on the camera. And so we do have other things that control the depth of field. But what you're going to notice first off is if you look at these two pictures of these flowers, how the background is blurry in one of them and the background is not blurry in the other. So this one on the left where the background is very blurry, that is what we would call a shallow depth of field because not very much of the photograph is actually in focus. The one on the right, we would call that a wider depth of field because there's more of the picture that's in focus. So not only are the flowers in focus, but you can see that some of those leaves in the background are kind of focused as well. Notice how distracting the one on the right is. When we have a nice shallow depth of field like the one on the left, it just makes your focal point pop because that distraction is removed as part of the blurriness. So that's what gets us really creative as far as taking photos goes. We would be using Aperture Priority on the camera to do this. So Aperture Priority is on that top dial. It would be the setting called AV. So last week we were working with TV, which was Shutter Priority. Last week we set it to that TV. We controlled how fast the shutter opened and closed when we took a photograph. And that was great for being able to stop movement or be able to blur movement. But when you have something that doesn't move, which is a lot of our photography, you want to be able to control then this depth of field. And so we do that through Aperture Priority or AV. It works the same way. This time we are controlling, though, the opening on the camera. So how big is that shutter opening and closing when it actually is going off? Watch this video here that Gary Fong has on understanding aperture. After you've watched that video, then you can also pay some closer attention to this example here. When we have a very large opening, you'll notice there's not very much of this photograph that is in focus. As we have a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller opening, notice how more of the photograph is coming into focus each time we change that aperture. And we get a lot more of the picture that starts to come into a clear form for us. The bigger the opening, the smaller the f-stop. So in this case, you can see that a very large opening is a very small number. And then the opposite holds true over here. When we have a very small opening, we have a bigger number. This works similarly to our eye. So if you think about it, if you're looking a far ways into the distance, and you see somebody walking towards you, you might be looking at them and thinking, oh, do I know that person? Who is that? It looks like so-and-so, but I'm not sure. And then if you squint, it comes a little bit clearer and you go, oh yeah, that is so-and-so. And so what happens there is we are actually closing up our eye and things are coming clearer. So notice that a small opening creates more of the photograph to be in focus. Now, if you notice, these are working opposite each other as far as the numbers go. So an easy way that you can maybe use to remember this is that a big opening is a small number. And a small number, a small f-stop, is a small amount in focus. So the size and the number work opposite each other, but the number and the amount in focus work in the same direction. Small number, small amount in focus. big number, big amount in focus. Now, since you don't actually have a camera, other than a couple of you that do have one, those of you that have a camera, you can practice taking some photographs using this Aperture Priority. And what I would say is you want to take some sets. So you would take a photograph of something, say it's a vase of flowers that is sitting on your table, and take that photograph using a small f-stop and then a medium f-stop and then a larger f-stop so that you can see the difference in your photographs as you are taking those photos. And I'll come back to that in a moment as to what else controls that depth of field in a very big way. The last thing that we're going to do for this particular lesson is we're going to look at this depth of field simulator. So those of you without cameras, and even those of you who do have cameras, we're going to all go into this depth of field simulator. So I'm going to open that up and I'm going to create a second video for that so that I can just demonstrate to you how that simulator works, which is very close to how our camera works.